Hello, everyone. My name is Father G. Reyes, and you are listening to the Renewing the Spirit podcast, a podcast of the American National Catholic Church. Today, on this episode, we will talk about the current immigration situation in the United States. As Catholics, we are taught to have a responsibility to care for the marginalized, advocating for their rights and well being. This includes recognizing the inherent dignity of every human being and prioritizing the needs of those who are most vulnerable. On this episode, we have invited attorney Marguerite, an immigration lawyer whom I met at one of the Know Your Rights event hosted by the organization Centro Comunitario CEUS. So, good morning, attorney Marguerite.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
So, would you please, just talk about yourself and let us know what do you do and what services you offer?
Well, I'm an attorney and I specialize in immigration law. I've been practicing for 25 years now, and my specialty in immigration law basically covers humanitarian immigration law and family immigration law. So under family immigration law, that's basically when people want to petition for their family members to be able to come to the United States or to legalize their status if they're already in the United States. And humanitarian immigration law covers a lot. It covers protections from deportation that you can apply before an immigration judge. It covers things like asylum. It covers things such as TPS, which is a temporary status for people who cannot return to their country because of a general civil war or general economic or environmental conditions. So it's a little bit like asylum, but more countrywide. And it also covers visas for victims of crime who are assisting the U.S. authorities.
Okay, thank you so much. That's a lot.
Yes.
So, I guess my first question is, given the current situation with the immigration, what is the best advice you have for immigrants who are in the United States?
Well, I would advise them before they file anything to speak with a licensed attorney. You can always ask the attorney for his or her bar number, and that way you can make sure that they are an actual attorney because there are a lot of scams going on. Um, in the Spanish language, for example, the word notario
Mm-hmm.
is means notary, and in many Hispanic countries, a notary has a lot of education. It's very similar to a lawyer or a public official, but in the United States, anyone can become a notary. It's just basically giving you a stamp so that you can certify somebody's signature. But there are a lot of notarios who take advantage of that false dichotomy between the languages, and they tell
Mm-hmm.
immigrants that they're going to file for their cases. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But even when they do, if there's a problem, they're not lawyers, so they cannot follow up with immigration. They cannot go with you to the court. They cannot go with you to the federal office for your interview.
Mm-hmm.
And in addition to that, there are people who claim to be legal immigration consultants. Generally speaking, if what someone is charging is like 5 or 10 times more than what most attorneys are charging, or on the
Mm-hmm.
other side is like 5 to 10 times less, it
Mm-hmm.
should kind of set off red flags and just make sure that you're only working with a licensed attorney.
Yeah, so you're saying they should have like a bar number, what
Right,
you mentioned?
right.
Yeah, okay.
So
And that
anyone
could
who
be
goes
verified through some website
through,
or
yes, yes. So basically, depending on what state they're in, immigration law is a federal law.
Mhm.
So no matter what state you are in, the immigration laws will be the same.
Oh,
So,
okay. So
uh,
meaning you can be an immigration lawyer at New York and New Jersey, doesn't matter.
right, right. So let's
Uh-huh.
say, like my office is in New York, But I don't only go to the offices in New York, I also go to the offices in New Jersey. I went to a court in Texas because the hearing had originally started there and the immigration judge wanted to keep the case himself out in Texas. So you can go wherever, but they have to be licensed in one state. So like I could tell my clients, "Oh, I'm licensed in New York State. This is where I have my main office. This is my bar number," and they can look it up. Generally, even in Google, you can just Google the state and bar association, and you can find out how to verify it.
Oh, wow. So
Yeah.
that's very informative. So, as a faith community, so we are a church, right? And churches, of course, gather, especially Catholic churches, gather on Sundays for Mass, and of course, other days for certain services like First Friday services. Um, Given this current situation right now, are churches safe spaces for undocumented immigrants?
Well, I would say not exactly, but at the same time, I don't think people should stop going to church out of fear. However, because it's a public space, ICE can enter public spaces. In the prior administrations, churches were considered as kind of off limits, like schools were considered off limits. But
Mhm.
now at hospitals, at courts, I'm sure you've heard in the news there was a judge in Wisconsin, I think, who was arrested because she didn't allow ICE officers access into her courtroom to arrest a criminal defendant who had also had some immigration issues. So ICE has pushed the boundaries a lot of
Mhm.
going into public spaces rather than just going to someone's workplace and to someone's home. However, I don't want people to feel like, oh, I can't go to the hospital if I'm sick, or I can't go to church if I need advice. People still need to do those things because living in fear is no way to live. And just that you have to know your rights. Now, knowing your rights means knowing what rights apply to you under the US Constitution. So there's the Fourth Amendment and the Fifth Amendment. So the Fourth Amendment is to prevent unlawful search and seizures. So if an ICE officer comes up to you wherever you are and they want to search you, you have the right to say no. You have the right to refuse to give information. The Fifth Amendment allows you not to answer questions because you don't have to self-incriminate. You have the
Mhm.
right to ask for an attorney. So basically, I think people should continue to live their normal lives,
Mhm.
but talk with an attorney to see what options for legal immigration relief they may have, and also to know if they are a target by ICE in this administration. So
Mhm.
things that may put you on the radar may be if you have a prior deportation order issued by a judge. You may not
Mhm.
even know you have an order of deportation because some people got an order of deportation when they didn't show up to a court hearing that they might not have known about. Maybe they were a child and their parents didn't take them to the court hearing and the judge issued a removal order against them. If you already have a removal order and you get picked up by ICE, ICE already has authorization to remove you. So it is a good idea to find out your immigration history if you don't know it, and then speak to an attorney. Is there any routes, legal remedies I can take to address having this deportation order? If you
Now,
don't
you
have a
talk. Sorry. Go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say, if you don't have a prior deportation order and you've been in the United States for at least 2 years, then ICE cannot do what's called expedited removal. Expedited removal would be, as the name says, expedited. If you've
Mhm.
been here for 2 years, they will have to give you an opportunity to go before a judge, and only the judge would be able to issue the order of removal. So it's
Oh, okay.
important. to think about how long you've been here, if you've had a prior order of deportation, what are special circumstances which may allow ICE to give you a stay of removal, and what legal remedies under the law you have, whether it's through family or whether it's through humanitarian relief. There are very few employment-based relief right now, especially
Hmm.
if you're undocumented.
Oh my.
Mhm.
So, you mentioned something about knowing the immigration history. Is there, how can we research that? As, is there a website or?
Well, not exactly. One thing you can do is, or you can have an attorney do, is to check your fingerprints for personal review. You can do that with your local state. You can do that with the FBI, and you can also do it via a FOIA request, which is under the Freedom of Information Act, which you can file with one of the departments of Homeland Security. DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, is divided
Mhm.
into three offices. So you have USCIS, Citizenship and Immigration Services, which is the benefits office, which adjudicates applications. You have ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, which, as the name says, is in charge of enforcement and removal, and CBP, which is Customs and Border Patrol. So if you know, for example, hey, I came into the U.S., I was a teenager. I don't have any of the paperwork. I don't know if I ever had a court hearing. One of the things you would want to do is see if any information comes up on your fingerprint record from an arrest at the border. And you can also do a FOIA request with CBP. You can do it with ICE. You can do it with USCIS. And you can also do it with the immigration court, which is called the Executive Office of Immigration Review, to find out if they have a record on you if you were placed in proceedings.
Oh, wow. Well, thank you.
The,
That's a lot
the
of
other reason
information.
why this is important to know is
Hmm.
sometimes through these FOIA requests, you can find out what's called your A number, your alien registration
Yeah.
number.
Hmm.
And if people don't know their alien registration number, they might have a way to access information, but without knowing it, that won't be available to them. So, for example, the immigration courts have a website. They have phone numbers where you can call and see if you have a court hearing. But if you don't have your alien registration number, you're not going to be able to access that system. So before you apply for anything, that's why it's important to check your history, see if you already have an A number, see if there's already been any type of decisions in your cases.
Oh.
And that's important to keep following up on that because sometimes people are stopped at the border but allowed to enter the US. And they were told that they would be given a date to appear in court. But
Hmm.
at that time, CBP might not necessarily have been filing all those cases with the court. It might take several years before they start filing those cases in the court. So you should always be checking with your A number through the immigration court system, which they have a phone number to do that, and they also have a website.
Okay. Well, thank you. Um, yeah, I remember because I was a naturalized citizen. And I think the point when I got my A number was when I was applying for a green card.
Yes, yes.
And
Because
prior
that
to
was probably
that,
the first thing you applied for,
yeah.
but some other statuses you might get an A number earlier.
Oh, okay.
So,
Okay.
And
Um,
for people who are stopped at the borders, they're often issued an A number.
oh, they are. Okay. Right. So, in case, say, for example, as you said, those ICE officers are not uh, barred from entering public spaces, meaning they could enter churches, right?
Mhm.
What is the best way for us as clergy, or I guess a part of who's a member of a parish council, probably? What's the best way to deal with immigration officers if they do show up in our public spaces?
Well, I think it's always important, um, as you said at the very beginning, that churches have a faith where immigrants are protected and
Mm-hmm.
a safe place, at least in the church's point of view, where, hey, our ministry is immigrant welcoming. We often participate. Churches often participate in having know your rights presentations by attorneys, or have communities where people can get referrals and get help. And even though, like I said before, the current administration has rescinded the policy that they won't necessarily go to churches, it's still possible. Now, sanctuary is not a legal concept. You cannot apply for some type of sanctuary status,
Mm-hmm.
but there's no law that is prohibiting ICE from enforcing or taking enforcement actions in a place of worship. However, we're not at a point where they're going to churches and just looking for random people. I would say that the highest risk would be if someone had a criminal history or a deportation order, and they have been trailing that person to try to find where to arrest them. I have not seen a lot of places where these things are occurring. I haven't heard of any churches in this area, at least, where it's happening. But I think you should analyze the church's private and the public areas. So public spaces, ICE can go in without a warrant, but a private space in the church, they would need a warrant, and the warrant would have to be signed by a judge.
Mm-hmm.
So if if your if ICE comes and your parishioners go into a private space, you would have to ask ICE, this is a private room in the church. We would need to see a warrant to allow you entry. And that warrant is important, would have to be issued by a court and signed by a judge.
Mm-hmm.
And it would have to describe the location that can be entered. So it's very, very unlikely that they would have something like that. They almost never have it. They often
Mm-hmm.
have an administrative warrant where it has a particular person's name and saying to within the ICE agency, this person has an order of removal from an immigration judge or from expedited removal at the border, and they want to use that administrative ICE warrant, but that's not the same as a judicial warrant. So you can refuse to allow ICE access into private areas inside the church. Now, whether the area is public or private, it depends on how that area of church is used and whether you would
Mm-hmm.
have what's called a reasonable expectation of privacy there. So, for example, same as in a workplace, the lobby is generally considered a public space.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like a cafeteria could likely be considered a public space too. Anyone could go in there. But a church office, which a general person from the public wouldn't be able to just walk inside unless they were being accompanied by, a church, a minister or somebody working at the church or a volunteer. That
Mm-hmm.
that would be considered a private space.
Oh,
You could
okay.
also put a private sign on your offices.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, I would just try to have a section of the church that would be designated private. However, you can't like take the lobby and just all of a sudden make it private. It has to
Yeah.
be reasonable. A place that
Yeah.
would be reasonable likely to be private, like, the counseling offices or the offices where the parishioners take counseling with the church leaders, places where the employees work.
Mm-hmm.
So, offices with closed doors. And
Mm-hmm.
also just remember that even if ICE is coming into the public area, you're not required to give any information about any of your parishioners' immigration status.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't have to give ICE agents any information, and you're not required to talk with them at all. You can say, hey, I'm exercising our church's right not to speak, and we would only answer questions after we consult with an attorney.
Mm-hmm. Oh, thank
So
you.
yeah, to sum up, make sure you have a private space and and politely let the ICE officer know that you're not you're not going to answer their questions.
Okay.
You have to be careful. You don't want to get into a situation where they can consider that you're obstructing, because obstruction of law enforcement can be considered a crime. So you want to make sure the parishioners know that if they are being detained, not to physically resist, to try to remain calm. Um, if someone is detained from church or in front of the church, you should try to get the name of the officer who's doing the detaining and find out, where they're being taken.
Mm.
Um, and it's a good idea for your parishioners also to have like a phone number of their attorney or their loved ones memorized or their church pastor memorized, because a lot of times people only have those numbers on their phone. And then if they're allowed a phone call, they may not, know the number by heart.
Mm. So, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So, I have specific questions that some of our people that submitted some questions to me, which requested me to ask you. So, I
Mhm.
hope you don't mind.
I don't mind.
And you can answer briefly.
Okay.
Um, so, for those who have overstayed their visa, say they're coming here as tourists, and they may have come to this country without proper documentation, but years went by, and they have had children who were American citizens. Um, what do you think is the best thing they should do? Because I know we've heard some in the news that an entire family was deported, but their children were American citizens.
Well, yeah, that's a little bit of a misstatement, or how can I say, like diminishing a little bit to make it a little bit too easy of a headline. So
Hmm.
American citizens cannot be deported. Um, However, when parents are being removed, they can request to have the children be removed with them on the same flight. But the children, being American citizens, can come back at any time. So that's
I see.
something that parents who are out of status, or especially parents who have a deportation order, they want to discuss with their family members now, before something happens and they get picked up. What do you want to happen to your children who are US citizens? Do you want to start putting some paperwork in place where there is someone else who can care for the children who are here, or would you want the children to come with you? And if that's the case, if you have a US citizen child, you should probably make sure that you have the US citizen child's passport. If your US citizen child is in school, or even if you have an undocumented child who's in school, it's a good idea for the parents to have people who are authorized by the school to pick them up. Because what's happened sometimes is that people may go to an ICE check-in, meaning that they've been under an order of supervision, and they check in with ICE every 6 months or every year, and everything's been going fine. But ICE can cancel that order of supervision at any time and decide instead to effectuate the removal. So someone may go to the check-in thinking that they're just going to be there for 15 minutes like usual, and then they end up getting detained, and there's no one who can go pick up the child at school. There's no person in the family who knows where all the documentation is. So you need really to have a plan with that. Okay. Now, just having US citizen children doesn't protect you from deportation. In certain situations, um, for example, being a single parent or having a child with special needs, that will often encourage ICE, rather than to remove you, to give you what's called supervised release, an order on supervision, where you're allowed to be in the country even though you have a removal order, because there's special circumstances that, for humanitarian reasons, grant that stay of removal. So there was something in the news recently where an undocumented mother was removed with her minor child who was about 4 years old, and that child had cancer. Now, these are situations where in the past that would have been a very strong case for the individual to get a stay of removal or to get what's called deferred action, where DHS would indicate them that they are not a priority for removal because of the situation of the child, and that, the I believe the attorney for those individuals are saying that although the children did go with them, they were not very well aware of what their rights are about whether the children should come or whether the children should stay behind. So that's why I also say that people should have a plan, so that you don't end up like some other people who the child is here and both parents have been deported and the child is with a family member or in foster care, and that isn't what the parents would have wanted. So the parents, need to make sure to have a plan for that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you asked like kind of a twofold question about people who have U.S. citizen children and they entered with a visa, but they overstayed, or
Mm-hmm.
people who cross the border and enter without a visa and have U.S. citizen children. So those are two very different situations in that when you enter with a visa, even if you overstay, if you have an immediate relative who can file for you, you can apply for your green card here in the US. You don't have to leave the US. Everything will be done in the US. Immediate relatives are spouses,
Mm-hmm.
parents of children under 21, and for parents of US citizens, the US citizen child has to be an adult to petition for them. So 21 years of age. So if I enter with a visitor visa, for example, and I have a child, once my child is 21, he or she can file for me as long as I have the proof that I was lawfully admitted. Now, if I didn't enter legally, that child could still file for me, but I will not be able to get my permanent residency based on that by applying for a green card in the US. I would have to leave the country and apply for it at the consulate abroad. And once you leave, there are bars on coming back that go into effect, which can be up to 10 years if you've been out of status for more than 1 year. So that's why it's very important to talk to an immigration attorney, because there are certain waivers allowed for that. You want to find out if you're eligible for one of those waivers. You
Mm-hmm.
also want to find out if there's any humanitarian means by which you might be able to get your status rather than through the basic family petition. For some
Mm-hmm.
people in removal proceedings who've been here for 10 years, and let's say they have a very sick child, like a child with cancer, the judge may cancel the removal proceedings and grant them permanent residency based on that extreme humanitarian situation, even though the person initially entered without inspection into the United States.
Wow.
So
Mm-hmm.
basically, if you did enter with a visa, you're in a better
Better
situation.
situation.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now, my question is, when you sponsor, just a follow-up about on that particular thing, when you sponsor, say, for example, you're a child over 21 and you want to sponsor your parent, right?
Mhm.
Um, do you have to prove that you can support your parents?
Yes. So for
Mm-hmm.
family-based petitions, the petitioner needs to file an affidavit of support with
Mm-hmm.
a copy of their most recent taxes. And they have to earn a certain amount above the poverty line, which changes slightly every year. However, the good news is if the child does not make enough or whatever U.S. petitioner doesn't make enough, you can get a co-sponsor. The co-sponsor doesn't have to be a family member. It just has to be someone who is a U.S. citizen or permanent resident and who earns enough income to
Oh,
file
okay.
as a co-sponsor.
Oh, wow. So that's very helpful. Okay.
Yes.
Um, another question.
Yes.
For this is regarding student visas, because we know certain student visas that certain people that have student visas can
Mhm.
actually work part-time within, I guess, within the school, right?
Mhm.
And some of them are looking for an employer to sponsor them. So once their student visa expires and they say they haven't found an employer yet, what is their best course of action?
Well, Oftentimes with a student visa, you will be able to get what's called OPT, which is the option in practical training. So, basically you got your degree, now you have a time period to work to put your degree to use. That's only for a temporary time. If
Mhm.
there's an employer that wants to sponsor you, the employer can start taking those actions. However, if you cannot find anyone where who's willing to sponsor you for an employment-based visa, once you stop studying and once your OPT is over, you start accumulating unlawful status.
Mm.
So the unlawful status is important to understand because if you are 6 months out of status, but less than 1 year, and you leave the US, you have a 3-year bar on re-entering. But if you have more than 1 year of unlawful status, you have a 10-year bar on re-entering. So it's important to try to avoid accumulating unlawful presence because
Mhm.
apart from certain humanitarian laws and the immediate relative family petitions, accumulating unlawful presence can hurt your chances of legalizing yourself. So, like I said at the beginning, employment-based visas normally you have to have everything lawful in your immigration history. No unlawful entry, no visa overstay for more than 6 months, no unauthorized employment. So if the person is thinking, hey, I came here to study in this field and I want to get my green card through employment, it's very important that they follow everything very
Mhm.
strictly. Um,
Okay, thank you.
mhm.
And one
Now,
final
if they
question. Oh, sorry.
entered with, sorry, if they
Go
entered
ahead.
with a student visa, let's say, and in the meantime they have gotten married, and the person that they married is a U.S. citizen, they can file for the green card under the immediate relative family petition that we spoke about because they were entered with a student visa, even if now they're not going to study anymore, they're switching to do something else, they still
Mhm.
have that other route.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good. Hopefully, they find
They find someone.
somebody that would love them enough.
Yes, yes. Well,
So,
that's a very important thing because if you do love someone, whether it's a child or a spouse or a parent, you
mhm.
want them to have lawful status because you
Yes.
want them to be protected from harm and you want to protect the family unit from separation. So it is an important thing to think about. It. Sometimes you see people who live together and they have child and one of them has a status and the other one doesn't, but the person who has a status has never found the time to, think about what they can do for their partner. And it may become, you don't want to get to a situation where all of a sudden it's too late because
Yeah.
if the person is removed, it's going to be much more difficult to get them back. So, it is important if you have citizenship status, I think, to talk to a lawyer. And if you're in what's called a mixed status family,
Hmm.
where, some people have visas, some people have nothing, some people have citizenship, to see what can be done for the good of the family.
Okay. Um, One last thing. Have you dealt with religious workers, religious worker visa?
No,
Uh,
I don't do those particular types of visas,
mhm.
but you go ahead.
I think my question regarding that is, let's say there's people that are, that have had training or have been ordained in a different country, but they came here as either as tourists or they were, are undocumented. Can obtaining, say, somebody is a church is willing to give them a religious worker visa, is that eligible? That do they have to leave the U.S. to get it, or they can stay here and we can work on giving them a religious worker visa?
Well, it depends on their status because there is a form that they can file with the I-360.
Hmm.
However, there there's two ways. There's the R1 visa, which is to work temporarily, and the employment based, which would be for permanent residency. And that would have stricter requirements regarding what work experience they have. However, they need to get legal advice because if they have been undocumented or they entered the country unlawfully, those are issues which can derail that application and
Hmm.
possibly put them at the attention of immigration, which might lead to their removal. So you want to make sure that if they have any unlawful status in the past or presently, you want to make sure that that is looked at and addressed before you make the application or before they leave, to see what types of inadmissibility bars they may have before they can come back.
Hmm. So, but if they're
That is to say,
but if they overstay their visa, they're here. Is it the same thing or
it's
as
not the same thing as
yeah?
an immediate relative. Um, if you, like I said, I don't work directly with churches to do this, so I'm probably not the best person to ask. But in
Hmm.
general, speaking, most visas which are related to employment, and when there's an overstay or previous unauthorized work, that can make you ineligible to adjust your status to a permanent residency or ineligible from entering the United States. So that's why I try to let people know that there's only when it's immediate relatives and through certain humanitarian laws that that will allow you to waive the fact that you overstayed your visa.
Hmm.
Overstaying the visa is not going to be a problem if you're adjusting to an immediate relative, provided you don't have any other inadmissibility issues. But with the religious visa, it's not the same as the family immigration law practice. So they should probably consult someone who specifically works with religious visas.
Oh, thank you. Um, uh, just another. I'm sorry, I just overlooked this question, but it's a simple question. Do you know of any programs that may be able to provide assistance with healthcare for immigrants? That
I do, but I don't have them on me. The organization which you mentioned at the beginning,
hmm CEUS,
sales,
right? Hmm.
yeah, they have a lot of documentation about health and programs and guides on those things, which I can ask them to send to me and I can email them to you so that you have them to give to your parishioners.
Thank you. I think when I was there at one of the events, I took some of the flyers, so
Mhm, mhm.
I'm gonna look at them again. So thank you very much. Can you offer us any parting words, perhaps any words of encouragement to those who are in this immigrant situation?
Well, I will just say that, consulting with an immigration lawyer, being truthful, both with the lawyer and on your applications, you prepare a strong case, you work with someone who's very detail oriented, make sure that, you check the deadlines and procedure wise is very important, but I
Hmm.
believe you will have a very good chance of success. Um, when you apply for legal relief that you are eligible for. Um, my practice is maybe 40% before immigration office here in the US, 40% with the consulates abroad, and about 20% in the court. And I'm still having very good experiences with the immigration officers
Hmm.
and the judges. So I wouldn't over worry. Um, if you are eligible for something, you do want to consult with an attorney, and the attorney will advise you, if this is the best time to apply, or if there's something that you may need to prepare more before you can apply. but definitely don't apply for anything on your own without going through an attorney because there's a lot of scammers out there who will tell you you're
Mm-hmm.
eligible for something when you're not, and you will end up losing money and, you know, messing up your chances to do it properly. I don't agree that people should automatically self-deport just because they're afraid. Um, Especially you should talk to an attorney if you're thinking about just leaving, because like I said, if you enter legally, you have certain rights to adjust status to a green card through family, for example, which if you leave the US, you will need a waiver to come back in.
Mm-hmm.
So just there is some information on the website that says leave the US now and you have a chance to come back legally. It's not necessarily true. Every individual situation is different. There are some applications, some legal relief, which you need to prove you have been in the US a certain amount of time, even out of status. So if you're eligible for one of those things, leaving the US before adjusting through that means of relief here in the US is actually going to derail your application. So don't just throw in the towel and say, I'm leaving. You know, talk to an attorney, see what type of benefits may be available for you because there are a lot out there. And if there isn't anything, talk about, you know, what future options you may have. You know,
Thank you very much.
you're
So,
welcome.
so you certainly gave us some very helpful information, which would help our communities. So I'd like to thank the listeners of this podcast, and we hope you found this information, this episode, informative and engaging. So if you found information on this podcast helpful, please share it with your family and friends, and may God bless you. So have a great day.